Hello and welcome back to this Damnful Idealistic Crusade. This video will be the next in my ever-continuing series of Laserdisc collection updates. This one's rather small, but I wanted to go ahead and get the disc that I picked up documented in video form as I do. So this first one is a title I didn't know that I might need until someone in the various fan communities alerted me to it having a variation. So this, of course, is the earlier Warner Home Video pressing of Magnum Force, the second in the Dirty Harry series. And to me, it's quite easily the best of the Dirty Harry sequels. This particular pressing, of course, is predating the Dirty Harry collection box set, which is really what you want to go for on Laserdisc, as all the films, except for Deadpool, are presented letterboxed with digital sound. Unfortunately, not original mono audio for most of them. They're all stereo remixes, but they don't add any new effects. They just simply replace the score in stereo. And they're actually great sounding. The Dirty Harry films have never gotten their original audio on disc, really, except for some, like the original, got it on the very, very first VHS or beta releases, and potentially the very first pan and scan analog Laserdisc as well. So I have the box set and didn't think I would need this earlier pan and scan version that does have digital audio, but someone alerted me to the fact that this actually does have a slightly different sound mix. So I found this for dirt cheap, actually, right after I found that out. And so just in my local travels, and it's in this nice plastic sleeve in good shape. So I figured I might as well pick it up and check it out. Again, it is not letterboxed, unfortunately. So you will want the version in the box set for, actually having proper aspect ratio. The rear is the standard Warner design with the black background and the silver bar across the side. They do make it very difficult to note that this does have digital sound, but it does. Unfortunately, not original mono as well, but it is supposed to be a little bit different than what's on the box set. So this is really more picking it up out of curiosity, not for, actually wanting to sit down and enjoy this particular pressing, because again, it's not the original aspect ratio. Next up is one of a few discs that I got from the great Vinny Onorati, moderator of Laserdisc Forever and member of the Laserdisc Wolfpack podcast crew. So thanks to Vinny for these. This particular disc I never thought I would find a affordable copy of, and had finally convinced myself that maybe I didn't need the letterbox pressing of Mad Max from Orion here in the US. But I'm so glad that I finally have it, as Mad Max is one of those films that has had a varied and long video history, and this pressing is no exception. This is the best version on Laserdisc by far, as all the others are pan and scan. The only other version of note really is in the Japanese Mad Max trilogy box set. This has a version of the original US poster art, which looks really nice. Condition-wise, it's in pretty good shape. It's got a little bit of corner creasing, but the fact that the background is black kind of helps to negate that a bit. There's a little bit of glossiness on it. I'm still going to try and work this sticker off. It's being a bit pesky, but otherwise, the jacket looks great. And again, original poster art is always the way to go. So the rear is pretty nice with some nice image selections. There are no extra features. It's just a single CLV disc. So the novelty, of course, was getting this film finally in widescreen, which seeing this film pan and scan is really a crime because the framing is so integral to the film experience. But the other major problem, and the reason why I had kind of talked myself out of getting this disc, is of course this does not contain the original Australian mono track, which is the way to experience Mad Max. This contains the infamous and at times hysterically goofy US dub of the film, where the entire film is redubbed by American performers and voice actors, and was done for its original release. That was really done by Roger Corman, but it was deemed, that when American International put this out in the drive-in circuit, where it did get some success, it really was not deemed appropriate for U.S. audiences, because I thought we couldn't understand Australian and Australian slang. And, when I finally saw the film with the Australian track, it was like, oh, finally I can experience this film. It's so much better, and I didn't have any trouble with the Australian track. So this does have NPCM mono, the original US dub of the film, which is really unfortunate that it happened. It's an interesting artifact of the time, but I'm so pleased that we can finally listen to the Australian mono, at least in some form, on disc, which is really the way you want to experience this film. You don't want to see it with the U.S. dub for the first time. But the U.S. dub does have its fans, and that was how most people first experienced the film, both on the drive-in circuit or in theaters, or as most people saw it on HBO or cable back in the day, and then all the U.S. video releases up until MGM premiered the Australian mono on its special edition DVD. The transfer itself, I have spot checked this a bit. It has some nice color to it. It looks rather nice. It has a sort of gritty feel to it. So it's well done. It's definitely the best version that I've seen prior to the DVD that MGM did. And it has a little bit more of the color that I felt was kind of lacking in the MGM masters. And of course, Kino Lorber has done a rather impressive 4K UHD release, but it is really cool to finally have the proper Laserdisc edition to have of really my favorite film of the series. I love The Road Warrior. I like Thunderdome. But for me, this one's my favorite, and I do actually think it is the best of the Mad Max series by a good margin. Really, it is very underrated, and it's a one of a kind, really independent film, and really broke such new ground throughout the Australian film industry, which was very minuscule at this point in 1979. Next up, two for my director's shelf. This one for Robert Aldrich, who directed the 1956 film Attack, with starring Jack Palance. This is a really nice surprise find, especially for the 95 cents I found it at McKay's for. This is actually a much later 1997 MGM pressing, so it has the updated MGM UA logo. It has the nice high gloss cover to it. So this is definitely a disc that normally you would pay quite a bit more for. It's not quite in the full crazy late release territory of their 1998 and 99 discs, but it's right up there. And they did start doing, for some reason, a lot of World War II films of the classic era into the 60s as well on Laserdisc very late in the game, and then a lot of these would then make it over to DVD under the MGM label very quickly. The rear looks rather nice, and it does have a little bit of special features in the fact that the digital track has the mono mix of the film, the original soundtrack, and then the analog tracks has an isolated music and effects track. So you get that plus the theatrical trailer at the end of side 2. So it makes it a really nice package. It's just a single CLV disc otherwise, and I'm pretty sure this is open matted because it doesn't indicate widescreen anywhere. And seeing as this was 1956, it would have been released, at least in 185. So I am assuming this is opened up to 133, and that, of course, the later versions would be properly matted widescreen. So that would be my only potential knock against this. Is I still like seeing, films in their intended ratio, even if they're just opened up to 133. But this should still be a really handsome presentation in terms of the quality of the Laserdisc itself. And, of course, you get the benefit of having the isolated music and effects track. Here's another disc from Vinny, and one I've wanted to get for a while, but usually every time you see it, it's a bit pricey, and because it's a Warner jacket with 2 discs shoved in it, almost always it's pretty beat up and the corners are shot or crumpled or something. So this is, of course, the Sidney Lumet classic 1975 masterpiece, Dog Day Afternoon, starring Al Pacino, and this jacket beautifully uses the original poster art. It's very bold because they maintain the stark white background. They don't put a bunch of logos on it. They don't have the stupid silver bar on the front. All you have is the little Laserdisc logo on the front. So it's one of the great Warner jackets that uses original poster art for the whole thing. Again, it is just 2 discs shoved in here and really needed a gatefold, but very thankfully, this cover is still in really nice shape. The rear is pretty standard in the traditional Warner design, but here they've kept the white background and they have a nice silver bar on the side with the red matching the title font. So it's an attractive looking jacket, even though it's just a standard Warner release. The film is spread over 3 sides, with side 3 getting the bump up to CAV for the climax, and it does have the original mono mix as digital PCM. However, the one quibble I have with this, and the reason why I didn't seek it out much earlier, is this is not a letterbox transfer. This is 133. So it is opened up from the original 185. It is not the intended way of seeing this film, but how you would have seen it on video and broadcast for years, really up until the DVD era, where it did finally get properly letterboxed, and of course on Blu-ray as well. But I'm very curious to check out the mono and to see if it is different or perhaps better than what we have on DVD and Blu-ray, as is pretty common for Laserdisc. And also, it'll be cool to look at the opened up framing, as sometimes that does give you, additional insight into the photography or the individual shot setups. And it's always cool to see some sequences that work a little bit better opened up and some that don't. And also it depends on, how good the operator was doing the transfer, because not every open matte transfer is the equal of another. You can have open matte look and be well done for one film, and then the next film you look at, it just ruins the experience. I've experienced that expressly. If you look at the original 4 Batman films, when Warner Brothers put them on DVD first, they kept the open matte version on the second side of a flipper disc. If you look at those, it's really interesting to note that one film worked pretty well, the next one just was not framed well at all and really has issues, and the next one works pretty well, and then the fourth, it kind of goes back and forth. It totally depends. So it's not just always seeing more image, it's making sure you maintain the framing and also maintain the visual importance of things within each individual shot. Next, for standard disc, this is just a simple upgrade copy of 1965's large format World War II epic Battle of the Bulge, directed by Ken Anakin. And I've gone over my older copy that in one of my last videos that I got. It was rather beat up and had some damage and stuff. And then lo and behold, I find this much nicer copy for less than $1. So this is just a simple upgrade. And it's a standard Warner Brothers release. It is letterboxed. It does have Dolby Surround encoding on the soundtrack, but this was a large format Ultra Panavision 70 release that really on video has not lived up to that pedigree. The Blu-ray's decent, but not very good. There's also some apparently some differences in the actual edit of the film and different run times. On the Laserdisc database page for this particular release, it's said by a user that this Laserdisc has a slightly different edit of the film. So I really want to compare that to the DVD and the Blu-ray just to check it out. But honestly, none of the video versions have really lived up to how good I think this film should look. On top of that, the film itself does have some issues. It's not the greatest, and it does kind of drag a little bit for being such a large epic, but you always have to admire these big roadshow epic films, even if they don't live up to the standards of the best of the genre. And it's always interesting looking at these films from a technical perspective as well and see how that played out over their home video history. So this is just a simple upgrade, a nice clean copy, and now I'll have to pass on my older dinged up one. Next up is the 1994 Paramount letterbox reissue of the 1970 musical Paint Your Wagon, directed by Joshua Logan, adapted from the Broadway stage play, and starring Lee Marvin, Clint Eastwood, and Gene Seberg. And this, of course, is rather infamous for being a unsuccessful attempt at bringing a musical to film, and you also get to experience Clint Eastwood singing on screen a lot. I've only seen portions of this film. I've never seen the thing in its entirety, so this will be a first time watch through for me. And also, it does have quite a bit of a longer runtime, so I know from all the indications I've seen, it is definitely a bit of a slog to get through, especially if you're a person like me who is not really into musicals. So that's another reason why I'd never decided to sit down and watch the whole thing before this point. But I did stumble across this nice condition copy for very cheap. Again, also in a nice plastic sleeve already. So that's always an extra bonus when you find a used minty LD for cheap that does have its own resealable plastic sleeve already on it. Saves you from having to put one on yourself. Again, this is a Paramount letterbox reissue from '94 when they started doing a number of letterbox reissues, all of which are uncommon and you don't see all the time, and you usually have to track them down if you're looking for this particular title. So this, of course, replaces a number of earlier crappy pan and scan versions of the film. It is spread across 3 sides because it does run 164 minutes, so it definitely has a bit of a daunting runtime if you're not into musicals. It is credited as having a Dolby Surround encoded digital soundtrack, and I believe this did have some version of stereo when it was released in 1970. But I believe previous releases to this were probably mono or just flat stereo. There are no extra features on here, but you are getting the film in its entirety, and finally letterboxed. So this is one of those nice Paramount upgrades that they kind of quietly did, and they sort of leaked out pretty much from 94 to 95, 96 or so, and they are the best versions on Laserdisc for these particular titles. So a really nice surprise to find just in the local used bins. The made-for-television film, The Shadow Riders, which is one of the westerns made for television that really straddle the fence in terms of being, yes, it's a TV movie, but it's got so many famous names on both sides of the camera that it sort of is like a feature western. But this was directed by the Western legend Andrew B. McLaughlin, who directed a number of really important westerns in the 60s and 70s especially. And you also have some really big names in the cast. In addition to having Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott, you have Catherine Ross and the iconic Ben Johnson. So that, of course, meant I had to finally see this when this nice condition LD popped in front of me. Again, already in its own plastic protective sleeves. So the original owner protected their LDs very well, so that way they made it to me in really nice shape. This is pressing from Vidmark Entertainment. The artwork, even though it's a little on the generic side, it looks rather nice on the LD jacket, lots of nice color. The rear is pretty straightforward. Again, because this is made for television, it's, I believe, 133, so you don't have to worry about letterboxing, but I believe it was shot on film, as a lot of these films were, so the production value should be rather high, and again, you've got a lot of notable names here. It does have digital sound. I'm not particularly sure if this is mono or stereo. It really depended on how much money they put into it. It could be stereo with Dolby Surround encoding, but I think they would have made indication of that. But so I'm betting it's probably mono, and it would have been shown on television that way anyway at the time, most likely. But you never quite know with these. That again, they kind of straddle the fence. It's not quite a full blown film production, but it's very much that because it is originally intended and designed to be aired on television. Next up is the third and last disc from Vinny. So again, thanks to Vinny for these. This is the 1984 film The Pope of Greenwich Village, which has been on my watch list for a long time. So this will be a first-time watch for me. But the reason why I wanted to get it is this is a much later, again, 1997 MGM pressing. So it is much later and much less common. Usually goes for a nice chunk of change and should be a really fantastic LD presentation. Of course, it has the late MGM black deluxe letterbox banner across the top, which gives you a good indicator. As always, this will be a really nice looking LD. It's got a little bit of corner creasing. It should have been a gatefold, but unfortunately it's just 2 discs inside a jacket. Has the updated MGM Home Entertainment banner in the bottom. A lot of nice gloss on the jacket, and of course pressed and distributed by Image, because of course they took over most of major studio distribution for LDs and LD manufacturing by this point in the last days of the format. Has digital sound, which I'm not sure. I believe this probably would have been Dolby Stereo, or it may just be mono. I'm not sure as to what the film was originally released in. It does include the theatrical trailer, and the film is spread over onto 3 sides. Side 3, of course, is nicely encoded in CAV, as is common for most later Laserdiscs anyway. So again, this will be a first-time watch for me of a film that's been on my watch list for a long time and should be really enjoyable on this later MGM pressing. Next up for 1990 is the film Nuns on the Run, starring the great iconic Eric Idle and the great Robbie Coltrane. This is another film that I've meant to see for ages, and it's sort of a throwback to classic comedies, and basically the setup of the film seems very reminiscent of Some Like It Hot, but at this time you have 2 career criminals who decide to strike out on their own, but of course wind up disguising themselves as nuns. So again, sort of playing with the idea of Some Like It Hot, but doing its own particular path. So again, it's been on my watch list for far too long, and this is a super minty copy. Again, the only problem is this is an open mat transfer. It is opened up to 133, and there is no letterbox version on Laserdisc that I'm aware of, but it does contain the original audio as on the digital tracks, and should be, yeah, it is Dolby Surround encoded. And other than that, it's a standard Fox disc. So again, I wish they would have just gone ahead and made this letterbox, but this was still rather early for letterboxing on home video, and Fox had only really started with the release of Die Hard, and it was still rather hit or miss whether films around this time would ever get a letterbox release. The other reason why I really wanted to see this is it was directed by Jonathan Lynn, who directed one of my favorite films of all time, which is 1985's Clue. And I always find interesting looking at his later comedies that are, sort of fly under the radar or kind of forgotten, because even if they don't quite work or they have issues, there's usually some really funny gags and interesting characters and character interplay within them that remind me of Clue. So this will be a first-time watch for me, and I'm rather excited to finally see this. Again, I just wish it was properly letterboxed. So that's it for this particular video. Again, a much shorter one. I'm just trying to keep up to date with my various Laserdisc acquisitions as I go along, and that way I don't have to make a bunch of 2 or 3 hour long videos or run the length of my usual longer updates. So as always, definitely keep supporting your local stores, keep the Laserdisc flag flying, keep your disc spinning, and keep physical media alive. Thanks ever so much for watching.